So here's the last question, and it's one that I guess was forming in my mind as I read the book and read these accounts, because the question always presents itself to me: what would you do, Shane, in this situation? And so the question I want to ask you, Dr. Pattengale, is how do we, as Christians in the West, who aren't threatened on a regular basis by these sorts of persecution, by threats against our lives because we profess Christ, how do we put ourselves in the mindset of those who were willing to give their life for their testimony, and prepare for the possibility, however remote, that we will be called on to do that? In other words, how do we become the kind of Christians who won't denounce Christ and who will say, he's been good to me for 80 years. How can I deny him now?
I was haunted. This book took 7 years. So there's many times I thought of that. So it was a great question. I told a crowd one of these book launch events, and I said, I think when they start pulling my fingernails, I don't. It's like I don't know how I would handle this. I've had quadruple bypass, and I've got, and I think I just trust that God would help us. David Jeremiah has a book on this, on preparing for persecution. Erwin Lutzer has a chapter in his book on the Nazis on what does this teach us today. Actually, they were down the list. They didn't quite make the CT article, but I could send my descriptions of those two books. Both are the most help I have found, because what happens, Shane, when you look at what Lutzer, I don't know if Erwin Lutzer from Moody Church, the voice of Moody, really, a good friend. I love the guy. He does a good Billy Graham illustration too. But what he's saying is that when you look at what happened in Germany, there are steps and there are principles that you see unfolding. And this was the church filled with Bible-believing men and women who simply were hoodwinked, some of them. And I think there's a time, and I've been hoodwinked in the antiquities area. Malcolm Gladwell, if you watch this, one of your most helpful books to me was talking with strangers about we default to trust. We trust people. So it's just the way we're made. God made us to trust people. He also gave the discernment of spirits, and there are people in your churches, I believe, that can help you when you have a heretic coming in, or someone that is sowing things that aren't good. I think there are people who have gifts to help discern that. And so for me, I think you need to read literature and have principles and steps to help safeguard it. I think you need to be in prayer, and you also need to lean on elders that have a gift of discernment that can help see that in people, because ultimately it is a matter of deception. Now, when it becomes organized, I said earlier, an institution is a systematic response to recurring need. There are also systematic responses for reeling evil, so they become, machines for the ills of mankind. And whether it's literally a metal, the whole ages are determined on the hardness of metal, and they're made for weapons. So who has the hardest metal ends up winning most of them. And so that's going to keep playing out. And because of the nature of humankind, if just study history. Wilford McClay has a pretty good history of America. You can find good histories of the world where men have been doing this to one another since Cain and Abel.
That's helpful. I think of another movie. You mentioned Silence a moment ago. I think of a movie that was sort of an unofficial answer to that, it seemed to me, and that was A Hidden Life. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, I did not see that.
Okay. But in A Hidden Life, a Christian faced with persecution by the Nazis, not by the Japanese, finds himself in a situation where he would effectively have to deny his faith and convictions in order to save his life and save the existence of his family. And he is urged in every possible way, through torture and duress, to just give in, right? and he refuses to. And he actually, until the end, unlike in Silence, he actually holds fast, and the Nazis end up killing him. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful movie in so many ways. But to me, the thing I took from it is that he was just an ordinary guy. He wasn't a super saint. He believed, and he was a layman in the church. But the strength was given to him when the moment came. It was a sense of every moment of not denying Christ is a moment of victory. Every moment of not reneging on his convictions was a moment of victory. And you see that with other men and women who did much the same thing. Dietrich Bonhoeffer would be a related example. But yeah, I just think of the not over preparing or relying on your own power thing as central.
Well, I first of all, I need to watch the movie. I don't get to a lot of movies, but I'll have to watch that. This is not a book of heroes. This is a book of, for the most part, everyday Christians. I don't know what God's going to call any of you to do. I don't know what's ahead for any of us on the persecution level, and whether it's the Columbine situation where, students ask if she's a Christian. And even though there's a different accounting now as far as who it was, it still was the question asked: do you believe in God? I'm reminded, Augustine. Two things with Augustine, and might be you said we're coming to a close here, so might be a launching point for you in your own studies. And then I would encourage all of you to read 2 Timothy 2:2, where we're supposed to be engaged in responsible dialogue with men and women so they can go therefore and do likewise. And for me, we have 4 sons and we have grandsons and 2 granddaughters, and we want them to go on with an understanding of what the truth is, because they're the ones going to have to live this out in a tougher place. But Augustine fled from the Lord, and he went to Milan, and they were having a debate over who should be the next bishop. And you may know the story. Ambrose stands up, and finally he's a businessman, and he just says, hey, he goes, let's just settle down here. And he tried to bring order, and he did, and people were listening to him. And a little child tugs on his coat and said, you be the bishop. No. And he goes and he does everything possible not to be bishop. He has pagan philosophers over, and he said, look what I've done. They go, and then the church comes back and says, look what we made you do. And he had, people of ill repute come over, and they go, look what's happened to you because of us. And finally, he reluctantly said, okay, I'll be bishop. He ended up having a profound influence on Augustine, a profound influence, someone who wasn't seeking the stage, but in a sense was setting the world stage for one of the greatest writers in Christianity. But do you know who else had a profound impact on Augustine? And he cites her story 2 or 3 times as Perpetua.
Well, his mom did.
Well,
Perpetua as well. Right?
His mom. I've actually been to her tomb in Ostia.
Wow.
I saw all the remains there. So you may know the Museum of the Bible, we had exhibits in Rome at the Vatican twice for 6 months. And so it made a lot of excursions to these holy sites for me. And so when you have Monica, you're right there, big influence. He's kind of running from her. But yeah, it was actually 2 women. Great point. It was 2 women, Monica and Perpetua, 3 really, and Felicita, her colleague there in the prison. But in Southern Africa, a wealthy woman was asked to recant, and she wouldn't. And her dad was so adamant that she recant. He even pulled his beard out, trying to get her to change her mind. The reason we know this is she kept a journal like Cheryl Beckett in the prison. So we know her story. And it's an amazing story. And she was still nursing a newborn. So she's wealthy. Sometimes you just think of these poor Christians. There were wealthy people that went to their death too. And Perpetua writes in her journal up until the time that they took her out. And at one point, we don't have time to get all the details here, but if you get the book, whether you get the book or not, you can find her story. At one point, she's knocked down and her hair comes down. It's a sign of mourning to have your hair down as a woman at that point. And you know what she did, Shane? She put her hair back up so that people would know that she was proud to be a Christian, and it was an honor for her to be a Christian. It wasn't a thing of mourning to suffer for her Lord. And I just think that's Where will I be if this time comes? I mean, it could in America. I certainly hope not. We still are vastly in the majority of those people who have a faith. But I'm just telling you, we stand on the shoulders of remarkable men and women who are now on streets of gold. And I just trust that all of you find comfort in the stories of those who've come before us.